If you remember television shows Soul City and Soul Buddyz, well, the co-founder of Soul City and CEO of Heartlines, Garth Japhet, shares more in his book Like Water is for Fish, The Power of Story in Our Lives. The offering is divided into 4 parts: shaping, framing, believing and influencing, with each subsection touching on a human interest theme. To tell us about what this read is all about and more, Garth Japhet joins us now on the line. Garth, a very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning to you, and thanks so much for having me.
Let's start with where the inspiration to write this book came from.
Well, I realized, I'm a medical doctor by training, and I was an unlikely doctor. I fainted at the sight of blood. I wasn't good at maths or science. But a series of books when I was about 13 called The Jungle Doctor just inspired me to the point of saying one day I want to be like that.
Yes.
I want to work in Africa. I want to be a doctor. And amazingly, I managed to get into medical school. I managed to qualify and then started to work first at Edendale in KwaZulu-Natal and then for 5 years in Alexandra Township at Alexandra Clinic. And I found that my experience of being a doctor was not the same as being the jungle doctor. It was very, very different. That I was sending people straight back into the same conditions that created the problems in the first place.
Yes.
And then I sort of stumbled upon, well, what if the story has influenced me so much and has changed my life? What if I start to tell stories? And that was the beginning of Soul City. What if I, take medical issues and place them in story form to educate millions? And then I realized, that in fact my whole life has been affected by story, and now through Heartlines we tell stories. And so I decided to write a book about the power of story in our lives.
Now unpack for us the title of this book, Like Water is for Fish, how it came about and the significance behind it.
Well, it's a lovely phrase that comes from a book that I'd read called The Storytelling Animal, which basically says, basically that is what differentiates us from all other animals, is that we tell stories. And the quote is that water is for humans like water is, story is for humans like water is for fish. It surrounds us all the time, and yet we're completely unaware of it. And I thought that really summed it up, whether it's news stories or book stories or Instagram stories or people's stories. Our world is awash in stories, and we are just completely unaware of it.
Yeah, and I think the stories that are going to resonate with people more in the book is that of Soul City and Heartlines. Tell us more about these stories and what they mean to you personally.
Well, the book is a mixture of my own story and about how Soul City came about, how Heartlines came about. It sort of deals with that, how this actually happened,
yes,
and then the impact of it and why it works. But it also, I managed to interview about 20 other people as well. This Lillian Dube, David Dennis, who played Soul, but then a range of other people as well, such as Zapiro, such as Ben Shlope, such as the lead singer from Freshly Ground. Just a range of people, a narrative psychologist, all about how story has really impacted, and they've either used it. Somebody like Tina is somebody who's used story, who believes in the power of story, or Lillian Dube, who spends, I think she's become loved as Sister Bettina, and just finding out from her the experience of actually almost living a story. I think Lillian is often more recognized as Sister Bettina than she is as Lillian Dube.
Actually, she is, eh? And when you look at what TV shows such as Soul City and Soul Buddyz have done in impacting how health stories were told in the media, and especially during that time, Garth, and you also share your own story, but also share the stories of people you've interviewed. Do tell us more about this.
Yes, well, as I said, that group of people that I've interviewed, and what's fascinating is they've come from very different walks of life. Some are actors, some are business people, some are playwrights. They all, and some are just ordinary people whose lives have been influenced by either stories themselves or other people's stories. And I think that's sort of 3 aims to the book. One is to awake us all to the power of getting to know our own stories. The second is about the power and the incredible healing offering it is when you get to know other people's stories. We have a film that we produced a little while back called Beyond the River. And in this film, we look at how when two people from different backgrounds get to know each other better, they find healing and they find understanding.
Yeah.
And that's another aim of this book, is that when we reach out to each other and get to know each other's stories, we find there's more in common than there is not. And then the final part is really the power of actually in one's own family, getting to know the stories of those in your family. We all think we've got lots of time to know our cousins' stories or our fathers or our mothers, and then they're no longer with us. So it's a call really to actually to spend that time, to be intentional, to get to know other stories.
And quite interestingly, you said that a story you read in the 50s had a huge influence on you becoming a doctor, and I suppose it underscores the importance of the power and importance, of course, of stories in our lives. And for many people that believe that they don't have any stories to tell, Garth, as a storyteller yourself, what do you say to such people?
You know, absolutely everybody has a story to tell. We do a fascinating thing called What's Your Story, where we spend time, we've done it in our own offices, we've done it with big groups, we've done it with churches. And the idea is that we listen to each other's stories. And lots of people start off and say, well, I don't really have an interesting story, or I don't have a story to tell. And then you just ask them a few questions. So where does your name come from? Where were you born? And invariably, you realize and they realize that they really do have a story to tell. We all have stories to tell. And I think telling stories is one thing, but the great gift that we give each other is when we really listen.
Oh, gosh. Dr. Japhet, we're out of time, unfortunately. Great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thanks a lot.
All right, indeed. That is Dr. Garth Japhet. He's a medical doctor who co-founded Soul City and is also the CEO of Heartlines. And he joined us this morning to tell us about his book of stories titled Like Water is for Fish.